The recent move by liberal entities such as HBO, the schools, television networks, and libraries to ban books and shows, which have been part of our culture for decades, reminds us of the campaign by the Nazis in Germany to burn books they didn't want the people to read. Now, we were taught that book burnings by Nazi youth at their universities and schools was a bad thing, that it eliminated the freedom of speech and thought. Now we see the same thing going on with books and movies by Mark Twain, Margaret Mitchell, and others. Along with this activity is the elimination of all statues and monuments, whether they fit the current narrative or not. Mobs are even tearing down statues of people who worked to end slavery. It makes no sense unless you realize the objective is to eliminate our history, period. This is a book I wrote revealing the history that had been systematically hidden from the American people for 200 years. It's titled, "To the Victor Go the Myths and Monuments." The reason true history has been hidden is that certain forces in our country do not want you to know the real story. They eliminate certain facts from the public mind over the years in order to channel your thinking towards socialism and the building of a new world government. They even infiltrate areas of our society in order to prevent you from learning our true history. I used a couple of quotes in the title page to set the stage for what followed. This one by George Orwell, author of the books 1984 and Animal Farm, says, "The most effective way to destroy people is to deny and obliterate their own understanding of their history." A more historical quote is by Cicero, the great Roman orator and senator. "To be ignorant of what occurred before you were born is to remain always a child." The same forces behind the problems you are witnessing today in the street, the schools, in Washington, etc., have been an increasing problem for quite some time and are now breaking out into the open and has communism as its base. One fact that most people are unaware of is that at one time, very early in our history, there were more indentured white slaves in America than those from Africa. Now, you never hear about them because it doesn't fit the narrative needed to get people riled up, to cause hatred that can be channeled for use by the communists to create the conditions of unrest needed to change America into a communist state. What are indentured slaves? They were people who got in trouble with the English government by opposing the king or by not paying their taxes. They were then sold as slaves for a certain number of years to either pay off their debts or serve their time for being against the government. These were almost always white English men and women. Some historians claim as many as 70% of those who came to the North America area in the early years were in this status, and the practice continued here in America for many years prior to the formation of the United States. They didn't teach you that in school, did they? Today, many Americans are either confused or disappointed in the Republicans, who seem to be powerless in the face of what is going on. They're supposed to be the opposition to socialism and communism. Some are, but the party is not. Another important fact from this book is that the Republican Party was actually started by key people in the communist movement. The communists have always had the infiltration of key aspects of our society as a goal, the newspapers, the schools, the churches, etc., in order to control the thinking of the people. One of the primary means has been to control the political parties. In the case of the Republican Party, the communists actually started it. The rise of the Republican Party was fueled by the communist network that existed in America before the Civil War. I will give you two names you can look up online and see the connection between the two and their involvement in starting the Republican Party. They are Alvin Beauvais and Horace Greeley. You may not find that Greeley joined the Communist Party under Karl Marx unless you spend a great deal of time looking for that fact. Greeley hired Marx as a European correspondent for his newspaper, the New York Tribune, for 11 years. There were other communists on his newspaper staff as well as other communist leaders in Europe who wrote for the Tribune. Beauvais worked on Greeley's editorial staff for a time. The entire socialist communist movement promoted the new Republican Party, and it was essentially controlled by the communists for some time until it grew to become more mainstream due to the influx of a wide swath of people who were not socialist, but in many ways the Republican Party has never lost its socialist roots at the top. Now, don't get mad at the person telling you these facts. Rather, look them up for yourself on the internet. The internet also censors certain facts, but spend a little time at it, play with it, and the story will emerge. Start with Horace Greeley communism, and then move out from there. The whole story will not be told, but you will get a general sense of it. The only place I know where the full story is told is in my book. This is a fact they have kept from you for many years. They continue the process of denying facts for future generations by the destruction of books and other means of communication. The censorship is growing, by leaps and bounds, on the internet. It's the same tactic the Nazis used in Germany with their book-burning program. As to the Republicans being the opposition to what's going on, let me tell you a story. I used to get into Congress periodically and give the conservative Republican representatives and senators research pertaining to issues we knew would be coming up. Often they had no clue about important developments that they would be concerned with down the road. These developments were not on their radar. Finally, I realized on my last trip that except for about 3 or 4 conservative Republicans, they were afraid to do anything to stand up in the face of some very adverse situations that would ultimately weaken the position of the Republicans with the voters. They were also afraid of the Republican Party leadership. Play it safe seemed to be the mantra. It is displayed today by those in authority taking a knee in submission or marching with the enemies of the Constitution and thinking that somehow they will be immune from attacks by the left. The Constitution? We heard things from congressmen like, well, we need to do things that the people want in order to get reelected. Reelected to do what? The Constitution would take a back seat. Most of them were afraid. Yes, afraid. Afraid they would not be able to raise enough money to get reelected. Afraid of their own congressional leadership. Afraid of the media. Afraid. They wanted to get reelected by compromising. Yet they professed the need to get reelected in order to do some good. This is what many of them said, but in reality, they never did any good at all. Oh, they talked about the problems, but rarely did anything about them. They made fine panelists on television, but rarely directly answered the questions put to them. Remember, the Congress elected in 2016 gave the majority to the Republicans, and what did they do? Stall, and then stalled some more. I used to be involved in the Republican Party politics in my small way, holding local office, ran for state representative twice, more of a party activist trying to inject the Constitution into the arguments within the party. And I can tell you that I ran into many conservative Republicans who were just as dishonest with their constituents as the so-called rhinos. You know what rhino means? Republican in name only. They would say one thing to your face and stab you in the back as soon as they could get away with it. I could talk to you for over half an hour relating experiences to confirm this analysis and the shenanigans they pulled to silence true constitutionalists. The only way you could get anyone to do the right thing was to organize enough people to hold them accountable. And it took a lot of work to get that done. Now about the current mess. Elected officials are not going to do anything unless they're forced to do them. That means you. You are going to have to speak to your congressman and get them to stand up and speak out. If enough of you do this, they will be forced to do the right things. If you don't, they won't. It's that simple. Call your congressman. Visit them when they are home. Email them constantly. Only by applying citizen pressure will they do anything to get others to follow your lead. And listen very closely to what elected officials say. When they finish, ask yourself, did they really answer the question, or did they simply drone on and on until you forgot what the question was? Did they really state what they're going to do? And through it all, make them obey their oath to the Constitution.